All right, good morning, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this virtual MetroPlan Orlando MAC meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Keith Trace, and I'll be chairing the meeting today until our chair, Dale McDonald, is on. We also have a team of folks working to ensure this meeting runs smoothly. Today's meeting was advertised on MetroPlan Orlando's website and social media, as well as through targeted emails. Florida's sunshine law typically requires a quorum to be physically present in a room for a governmental meeting. However, Governor DeSantis suspended this requirement in an executive order allowing government boards to conduct business using virtual meetings. This order has been extended through the end of September. It is now time for the Pledge of Allegiance. Today, I was asked to start the pledge, but so we'll do that now. If you could all stand, and I will lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If we could keep our microphones muted, unless we have been recognized to speak, and we'll use the raise hand feature to participate in discussion. There are 2 public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public who want to speak will use the raise hand feature found in the participants tab. If attending by a phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand and request to be recognized. When you are called, your microphone will be temporarily unmuted by staff and will ask you to state your name and contact information for the record. We also accepted comments by email and phone message before the meeting. The guidelines for public comments are posted at metroplanorlando.org/virtual meetings. We want this and all future online meetings to be acceptable to all. Participants may join by computer, tablet, or phone. If you need accommodations to participate in the future, please contact MetroPlan Orlando. At this time, I'd like to call on Ms. Whittington for some announcements and agenda review.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members, and thank you so much for stepping in. I appreciate you being able to jump right in there. Thank you for working with us as we conduct these virtual meetings. We appreciate your patience and your understanding. As of today, I'm unable to confirm whether the next MAC meeting will be virtual or in person. We are seeking direction from the board next week at their meeting on how our committee meetings will be conducted through the end of this year. We will be in touch with you before the next MAC meeting, which is in November. And again, we thank you for your flexibility during this time. As the chair mentioned, we'll be using the raised hand feature to recognize committee members during the meeting and to call on members of the public during the public comment time. If you've joined us by phone only without video screen, please use *6 to mute and unmute your line, or you can use *9 to raise your virtual hand so that the meeting host can see that you wish to be recognized. You'll see that there's a chat feature on your toolbar. This communicates with all panelists in this meeting, which includes the committee members, staff, and the presenters. We ask that you only use this if you're having technical difficulties or you need assistance. A full record of the chat comments will be included with the public record for this meeting. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my announcements for this morning. There are no changes to the agenda. And unless someone has a question for me, I'd like to ask Kathy Goldfarb to conduct the roll call and to confirm that we have a quorum.
I'll ask all committee members to please go ahead and unmute yourselves now for the roll call, and you can go on mute again after your name is called. Please make sure your video is on if possible so we can confirm it's you. You'll find the unmute and video buttons at the bottom left side of your toolbar on the bottom of your screen. Please say here or present when your name is called. Cole.
Present.
Dallas.
Present.
Versner. Foraker.
Present.
Glancy. Lacey. Leary.
Present.
McDonald.
Here. On phone.
McMullen,
Present.
Morgan,
Present.
Smith,
Present.
O'Brien, Sladek,
Here.
Trace.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, good morning and welcome to this virtual MetroPlan Orlando MAC meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we are now at public comments on action items. Yes, we went ahead and got the meeting started.
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, we have a public period here. Ms. Goldfarb, do we have any public comments?
No, we do not.
Well, I'm glad we got that out of the way. Okay, let me find where I am here. Okay. We had chairman's comments. No, we've already passed that. Announcements and agenda review. Virginia, where are we?
We are at action items, item 7.
Okay, do everything Virginia tells you to do. We'll move forward.
We have Councilmember Trace is currently, he was presiding over the meeting until you were able to have access. And since you're only on the phone, if you would rather that he continue chairing.
Yes, that would be a great idea. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Trace.
All right, I guess I'm back at it. All right, so on action items, we have 5 action items today. Our first action item is the approval of the minutes from our June 25th meeting, which you'll see on tab 1 of your agenda packets. If anyone has any comments, if they bring them up now. If not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Who was the
All right.
first and second?
Cole and McDonald.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and this is a voice vote. All committee members, please unmute yourselves. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Up next is the next item is our FDOT amendment to the 2021 to 2024-5 TIP, found in page 2 of your agenda packets. Mr. Keith Casey is presenting this information.
Okay, good morning, committee members. This amendment includes projects that had funds that were originally programmed in fiscal year 2020 in last year's TIP, and those funds were not committed by the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. And so they just automatically roll forward to fiscal year 2021 in FDOT's new adopted 5-year work program. So we have to amend our TIP to include these projects so it'll be consistent with the work program. And as some of you know, this is a routine procedure that we go through about this time every year. And the roll forward information from FDOT is in tab 2 in your agenda packets. So unless there's any questions, we're asking for your approval of the amendment.
All right, thank you, Mr. Casey. If we don't have any comments or questions, do I hear a motion to approve the TIP amendment?
So moved.
All right, can we get names when we have motions and seconds, please?
Commissioner Smith.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second, Dowless.
All right, is there any discussion? This will be a voice vote. All committee members, please unmute yourself. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Our third item is another FDOT amendment to the fiscal 2021-2024-5 TIP, found in page 3 of your agenda packets. Mr. Casey will be presenting this item as well.
Okay, this amendment is pretty similar to the first one. This is Sunrail's version of their roll forward report. These are Sunrail projects that had funds that roll forward from fiscal year 2020 to 2021. So again, we have to include these projects in the TIP to be consistent with the work program. And that information is in tab 3. So again, we're asking for your approval of the amendment.
All right. If there aren't
Dale
any questions,
Also moved.
all right. Motion from Mr. McDonald. Is there a second?
Second, Mayor Morgan.
All right, perfect. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or comment? And this is a voice vote. If you could please unmute. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Our fourth action item today is the readoption of the 2025-2026 through 2039-2040 prioritized project list found on tab 4 of your agenda packet. Mr. Nick Lepp from staff will be presenting today. If you can go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm here to present the readoption of the prioritized project list. I know I presented this last July to you, actually June, for adoption. None of the rankings or the projects have changed. What we have to do is add a line item in for our Unified Planning Work Program. We have a couple tasks in there for special projects where we performed an Oakland mobility study, some work down in Belle Isle, and also the Corinne Drive study. This was all performed under those special project tasks. So for direct linkage between our project priority list and the UPWP, we are adding a line in there under complete streets for these projects and these tasks. So for that reason, we are looking for readoption of the prioritized project list, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lepp. Does anyone have any comments or questions for staff? All right.
Mr. Vice Chairman, this is Dale McDonald, and a quick question of Nick. And again, I apologize for my lack of preparation here this morning. Is the Maitland Avenue, Maitland Boulevard intersection on the priority list?
Yes, sir, it is. It was added and adopted back in June. This just adds one line item under multimodal projects for the use of MetroPlan's TMA funds, so it did not affect any rankings of any projects, which includes the Maitland Ave, Maitland Boulevard interchange.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
And is that a motion I hear from you?
It is so moved.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Name on the second, please.
Second, Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Is there any discussion or any other questions? All right, this is a voice vote. If everyone can please unmute. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Up next, we have final action on the approval of the updated bylaws of our MAC committee. These are found on page 5 of your agenda packet. Ms. Whittington, can you please present?
Let's go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning again. The purpose of this presentation is twofold. It is to review the changes or proposed changes that have been initiated by staff as a result of implementation of our strategic business plan, and also to make recommendation to receive your recommendation to the MetroPlan Orlando board. From time to time, these bylaws are reviewed by a bylaws review committee on odd numbered years, but this one has been triggered by the staff as a result, again, of implementing our strategic plan that was adopted by the MetroPlan Orlando board last year. The first change, and these changes really are minor. If you'll go to the next slide, the first change you'll see are universal changes, revisions that changes chairman to chairperson throughout your bylaws. This has been done to all of the bylaws for all of our advisory committees and the internal operating procedures that govern the MetroPlan Orlando board. And secondly, long-range transportation plan has been revised to metropolitan transportation plan, consistent with the adoption that you are going through at this time. Next slide. Going into those changes that are specific to the Municipal Advisory Committee, first is found in Section 4 under membership. We've added the use of virtual meetings. I know that we are all zoomed out and we have gotten to a place where we really want to get back to face-to-face meetings, but MetroPlan Orlando has experienced some of its highest participation with regard to public and even our members during this time that we have been meeting in this virtual space. And so we've added language just to clarify that we would be offering virtual meetings at some hybrid formats that we would be able to make a wider use and availability for public. In fact, Cynthia Lambert is going to be giving a presentation in just a little while that will share some of those numbers and how widely this has been useful to us. In Section 5, with regard to officers' terms of office, we have removed the references to the Regional Leadership Council. This council is a subcommittee of the MetroPlan Orlando Board, and we are recommending that that council be dissolved, and so there's no longer a need for the chair or vice chair to have that under their duties. And finally, under officers in terms is that the new officers, your election cycle for this committee happens in June, and then July begins the term of the new person. And in the past, we have had occasions where that first meeting is not in July, and I think we're just taking out the words July and replacing it with the first regularly scheduled meeting following the election. As you know, sometimes in July, your meetings bump up to the 4th of July, and you have on occasion canceled those meetings. Next slide, please. And this is the last one. Under Section 9, we corrected a typographical error that was there having to do with board structure and committees. There was a number 6 that should have been a number 5, and that just carried over. And then lastly, we added a section under the bylaws review and amendment that codifies the fact that staff is able to initiate bylaws updates. This is not the first time staff has initiated changes to your bylaws, but from time to time with changes that may occur, as have with our internal operating procedures and other operational efficiencies, it may be necessary for us to bring these back to you. And so, Mr. Chairman, those are the recommended changes proposed by staff. I'm happy to respond to any questions that any committee members may have, but I am looking for a recommendation of approval to the MetroPlan Orlando Board.
So moved by Megan Sladek.
Second, Dale McDonald.
All right. And are there any questions or comments for Ms. Whittington? All right. This is a voice vote. All members, if you would please unmute, and all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Item 5 passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Up next, we have 3 presentations on today's agenda. Just for decorum, if we could please use the raise hands function to be recognized if you would like to ask a question. You may raise your hand during the presentation to indicate you have a question, but then we will hold all questions until the presentation is over. If you're having audio issues, you can use the chat feature as well. First item is we have a 2-part update today on the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Mr. Alex Traeger with MetroPlan Orlando staff will lead off and look at the primary needs.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and good morning, all MAC members. Today I'm going to be presenting, but really introducing the preliminary multimodal needs and some of the opportunities that we identified as part of the 2045 planning process. You've heard me talk about methodologies and approaches over the past few months. This is when we start coming with some findings, identifying those solutions, and really coming forward with some tangible needs. So we've discussed the needs assessment process in detail, and we can go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned in previous presentations, we've used multiple approaches to identify our needs. We've identified opportunities as part of this planning process, as well as documenting our desires, our regional vision for our different modal categories. All of this is consistent with our board regional transportation vision and goals and objectives. Our planning process here looked at both, traditional trend needs, but also considered a scenario planning process that looked at 3 alternative futures. And I hope some of you were able to join us for our Future Fest earlier this week, and Cynthia will talk more about that. But you've heard me talk about scenario planning and how we're considering the impacts and implications of various futures, those disruptions on our planning process, and how, as we look at strategies and investment, and how we look at the impacts of supply and demand. So that's incorporated in our needs assessment, those fluctuations and kind of that probabilistic approach. But we can go to the next slide. So before I introduce the preliminary needs, I wanted to just recap the process. Can we go to the next slide, please? Great, thanks. So we identified needs based on a couple different approaches. One, reviewing existing regional, state, local plans, as well as initiatives. But we also utilized a GIS data model. So a really powerful database-driven model that considers over 25 different factors that really capture the essence of our vision, but as well as our goals and objectives. To organize the preliminary needs, as you're going to see here in the next few minutes, we're using the same modal categories that are consistent with our transportation improvement program and our prioritized project list. So you're going to see some consistency across our planning products. And as you review these findings, you may note that some corridors may show various or multiple needs across all categories of modal categories. And I think that's really just evidence of our systems, many users, many needs, many purposes. But as we move forward in the planning process and as staff, and we work with your staffs to develop projects and identify those projects and estimate costs, we're considering that multimodal emphasis as we're developing those descriptions. So it's not just about widening a lane in some cases, it's widening a lane, with a bike lane, adding fiber optics, and including, improving the intersection along the way. So keep that in mind as we're looking at needs. These are mode specific needs, but we put them all together as we move forward in our planning process. So we can go to the next slide, which is our roadway needs. And these are many, as this really is our primary means of getting to A to B. Still likely the network of the future. Combustion may change, autonomous vehicles will definitely be transformational, but this will be the system that those vehicles travel to and from on. So but what do we do now? What do we do in the next 5 years, 10 years? How do we prepare for the future? And how do we really make the best use of this very finite space? So we're not putting out stranded assets and we're not misinvesting. So we can widen, and this has been our traditional approach in many cases. And in some cases, this is still the right one, especially, like I said, when those projects do include some of those non-auto elements that improve safety for other users and comfort for other users as well. As part of this planning process, I want to be clear that we did not seek to identify new widening needs using a travel demand model like we have in years past. Though, based on that review of local and state plans and some growth and development patterns, there is some need in some cases for more capacity based on, like I said, those local and state plans. Earlier this year, we coordinated directly with our local agency partners to review existing and future number of lanes. And based on that analysis, our widening needs are really a byproduct of that. As we move forward with a local review of our preliminary needs, these needs will be vetted, these lists will be vetted to make sure there's not any discrepancies in the number of lanes, whether that's 2 to 4, 4 to 6, things of that nature. So, but there are many cases where adding lanes is not physically possible or really even desired, if you think about that. So this long-range plan is really our first to identify complete street opportunities really outside of our existing priority list. So in those priority lists are included as needs And this map here that you see on this slide includes our existing context-sensitive priorities, those complete streets projects, as well as our top 100 high-scoring constrained corridors. So those corridors that we can't widen, we're going to have some challenges, just with the amount of feet right-of-way that we have. Those are where we need to take a deeper dive, and we've identified those corridors so we can conduct that, more detailed planning and engineering studies after we adopt the plan. Also, as part of this 2045 plan, as it relates to the roadway needs and challenges, we've identified freight-specific needs. So these are bottlenecks, some of those first and last mile freight operational challenges, as well as we're documenting the truck parking deficiency and lack of safe and secure truck parking that our region has. We've talked about that in past presentations, and we're making sure that is encapsulated and ingrained in our needs assessment here. So we can go to the next slide. We talk about the roadway network. It's not all just about asphalt, concrete, and steel. There are other ways to make most of our system, and that's really our systems management and operations solutions. These solutions do support all users, especially as we advance and involve with technology. But these solutions and needs really are focused on optimization, on reliability, and safety. So as our system evolves and becomes more technological advanced, these TISMO solutions will really provide the means to ensure our networks are adaptive and are actively managed. And like I said before, developed with the future in mind. So this category need also focuses on intersections and those many conflict points, especially between the different users and our most vulnerable users. So this is about making the system more efficient, like I said, but also more reliable without compromising safety. So safety first, and that's why you also see some safety needs on here. Those are corridors that we see the need to conduct additional analysis to improve safety. Can't solve it within the plan, but we can definitely and absolutely acknowledge that we have some safety challenges along some of our key and most traveled corridors. So we can go to the next slide, please. And this is really our transit needs. And for the 2045 plan, those transit needs are really a composition of existing and near-term needs, but also long-term vision and some of our unfunded desires. We want to make sure that we don't lose sight of vision in some of these challenging times. So with that being said, and as I've mentioned in previous presentations, we want the transit element of this long-range plan to be implementation focused and really ground truth, and what I mean by that is we want to ensure that, we're recognizing the costs of continuing existing services into the future. So as we identify impactful midterm and long-range service improvements, that's great. But we also, and in some cases, more importantly, we need to identify and do a better job planning for that essential operations infrastructure, needed to really operate and maintain this, regional transit system, what we have today and even more in the future. So the Lynx's current operations center is currently over capacity. And like I said, we need this behind the scenes infrastructure to make existing transit service possible, but also as we talk about more premium services, longer hours of service, more frequent service, we need to be more cognizant of the necessary kind of behind the scenes infrastructure required to do that, especially as we talk about electrification of our transit fleet. So these transit needs also include improvements to, like I said, existing fixed route. So where we want to improve some headways, improve some frequencies, but also some new services. We've talked about those in the past. Some of these corridors have gone through some really detailed studies, alternatives analyses, multimodal feasibility studies to kind of identify the type of service and operation, the concept of feasibility that would be operated. Those are also included in this plan. Also encapsulated is our interregional passenger vision for high-speed rail. So that would connect us to other major metro areas in the state and really beyond. So these needs are identified by reference. And as you know, implementation and funding is really likely solely based on some form of public-private partnership. But a lot of that's coming out of the ground today. I keep getting emails about the innovative construction activities that are happening to connect the Florida's major metros with high-speed rail. So stay tuned. Next slide is our ped and bike needs. These are what I call our active mobility or active transportation needs. And this is our needs, but also infrastructure gaps. So our analysis that we conducted and I presented on in previous months focused on, like I said, identifying gaps and potential opportunities, but also measuring what we call bicycle level of traffic stress. So that's about identifying those comfortable corridors. So we looked at those comfortable corridors. We looked at our transportation improvement program, those existing priorities, and said, how can we leverage, how can we make the most of those existing priorities? Can we supplement them? Can we complement those projects by making the most of the infrastructure? So finite funds and being good stewards of those funds. Similar to the TIP and our priority list, we've organized the needs based on filling those critical sidewalk gaps, as well as filling some of those critical trail and shared use path gaps. Like I said, we also identified crosswalk potential and other cycle connection opportunities, but we acknowledge, and similar to some of the other safety corridors that need, more engineering and planning studies. Post MTP adoption, sometime next year we'll dive more into those corridors with the proper and appropriate type of analysis to get those projects from concept to something that can go to construction. So I believe it is important to recognize, like I said, those needs. While they're not projects just yet, it's important to recognize those needs because, as you know and are well aware of, and you probably share this, pedestrian and bicycle safety is a board emphasis area and critical to us. So we need to make sure that we're planning for that critical infrastructure that really supports the safe crossing, of course, within the context of the surrounding land uses. All right, we can go to the next slide. And I mentioned this earlier in my presentation. We will be sending out, as we've done traditionally, PDF maps, PDF tables, some of those electronic files as we've done in the past. You should expect to receive an email from rather myself or Virginia with more information about these needs. I want to make sure we're sending this information to your staffs. We want to make sure you also have it on hand so you can review it as part of our advisory committee process. Something that's new and that we have and that we're proud of is that we have an online data viewer. You've heard me talk about in the past, some of our maps are a little challenging to read. 3-county region, larger than Delaware. We're trying to fit that in 8.5 by 11 map with detail and high resolution. With this online data viewer on our website, you'll be able to do that. Zoom in, zoom out, pan around, turn layers on and off, and you'll be able to do that, from the comfort of your home, but also looking at the resolution of your local municipality, so you can kind of see what's happening around you. So those files aren't up on the data viewer is live on our website, but I haven't had a chance to upload those MTP preliminary needs yet. So when I send my email out to you later next week, like I said, I'll include the traditional products, but also a link to that online map when we have those needs layers provided. So that's coming soon. Please be on the lookout. We can go to the next slide, and that's really next steps. And like I said, we have 2 paths. There's the planning side, and like I said, we're going to send out those needs for local review early next week. In parallel, MetroPlan staff is really going to continue our project screening, our environmental screening, our health screening of these projects. We're initiating some of our preliminary prioritization process to really start putting together, like I said, that cost feasible plan. That's kind of our end game. That's our end product of this long range planning process. Identifying needs, establishing vision, but at the end of the day, we have to identify a cost constrained, a plan that we can afford based on existing revenues. Sometimes it's a gut check, especially based on our vision and our desires and our current revenues. But I think it's also extremely informative to the region to say, if we have this vision, if we have these desires, what do we need to do to make those projects that are currently not cost feasible, affordable in the future? And there are absolutely mechanisms available to local governments to make that possible. Cynthia's going to talk about public participation in the next presentation. So I just want to spend my last couple seconds with you, inviting you to our MTP working group on September 16th. We're going to spend over an hour talking about this very topic. So you're absolutely invited. Mayor McDonald, participates with that group, and we'll keep him informed as well as you as we move forward in the coming months. So, with that, I appreciate your time and attention today, and I can do my very best to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Does anyone have any questions for him today? Virginia, do we have any raised hands?
I don't see any yet. Let me just give it a second. No hands, Mr. Chairman.
All right,
Figure out
perfect.
how to raise my hand fast enough, but I wanted to ask, what would it take to get something going at the like for kids who walk to school? I'm still a little bit frazzled. My older son came back from school a little bit after this meeting started because there was a car biker incident, and all the kids in all of the Metro Orlando area who live within 2 miles of a school, they're biking and they're walking unless somebody is jamming up the road with cars, which, I love MetroPlan's idea, so we're not doing that. But there are some issues with this that are very significant, and these are our youngest people. So I just I had to get it out of my system and let you know why I'm off video a little bit here, because he's home and understandably frazzled. But I'm glad it's in there, and if we can go faster, count me in for helping.
Right, Mayor. Yeah, our children are some of our most vulnerable users. We want to make sure we're providing those, safe and comfortable, routes to school. We do have a program in partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation. If you're not aware of, it's called Safe Routes to School. It is a program that takes that we coordinate with FDOT. It would coordinate with your city as well as the schools in question. So it actually involves the principals. It's at that level of providing those safe connections for students. So that's a mechanism that we can provide. We're identifying some of those routes as part of our long range planning process, but there are near-term programs, funding programs that Nick and I can walk you through maybe another day, talk to you about some of the opportunities of those funding programs to solve and provide some of those, like I said, safe and more comfortable routes to school.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Certainly.
And in St. Cloud, we've used that funding opportunity a number of times for some sidewalks and crosswalks, and it's a great program. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Traeger? All right, moving on. I think Cynthia or Ms. Lambert has a update for us on public outreach.
Cynthia's good, thanks. It's good to see your smiling faces today. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been hearing from the community. The last time I spoke with you, it was 6 months ago at your March meeting. And next slide, please, Kathy. Those were the times when we were blissfully unaware of everything that was going to be happening in the world very shortly thereafter. So if you'll remember, a lot of our pre-pandemic outreach strategy focused on reaching people face to face. So, giving presentations to community groups, participating in these large scale community events as well, setting up booths and tables and things so that we could talk to people face to face. But unfortunately, when COVID hit in mid-March, we had to cancel, at least a dozen events that we had on the calendar. We were going into our busy season. So we had to put a pause on things. And once we figured out that this was really going to be, we're settling in for the long haul on this pandemic, we had to completely change our outreach strategy. So we spent some time thinking about things and how we could best create virtual programs for folks. And next slide. So our new approach really focused on a series of all digital strategies. And that had three main components: outreach webinars, videos, and market research. And I'm going to share some details about each of those things with you today. Next slide. So we have had several webinars in the month of August, and we just finished up our last one this past Tuesday evening. And our first two that we offered were called Planning for 2045. And this was essentially our community presentation where we give an overview of some of the challenges that we encounter in planning 2 decades into the future. And then we also talk about some of the opportunities as well. So what can the region do to address some of these challenges in the 2045 plan? For these 2 sessions, we had a very nice attendance of 88 attendees at the live sessions. And so far, if we combine that with the views that the videos on our YouTube channel have gotten, those are up to nearly 200 people have viewed the program. So this is great. The wonderful thing about doing a webinar is that people don't have to be there when you have the actual event, right? They can go back and they can catch the information after the fact. So that is wonderful. And we, one thing that we're doing is continuing to promote those recordings so that people can still be informed and learn more about the long range planning process. And then we had another webinar specifically on health and environment. And this was more technical in nature, and it was meant to reach professionals working in both the public health and the environmental planning and resiliency areas. So, coordinating with these two groups of important stakeholders is something that the federal requirements they want us to do. So we wanted to make sure and reach these folks. And since this plan is going above and beyond anything we've done in the past on the public health side, we wanted to feature that as well. So this webinar had very nice attendance as well, along with the YouTube views. This has been viewed nearly 150 times. So we're really happy with this virtual format, and we have a lot of engagement as well. So people submit a lot of questions, a lot of comments. So it's nice to have that two-way communication with our audiences. Next. So this past Tuesday, we had kind of our grand finale for our virtual programs, and that was called Future Fest. If you weren't able to join us in person, I highly recommend that you make some time to watch this on our YouTube channel. This was a really fabulous program. We had a national speaker. He was the president and CEO of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America. So he talked about technology and kind of, what we can expect technology to do for us in the future, and how our region can make our plans safer, greener, and smarter. So his keynote address was really great. Then we followed this up with Alex and John Kaliski from Cambridge Systematics gave a description of these 4 futures that we're looking at. So 4 different versions of the future that we're planning for. You guys have heard a little bit about this in your past meetings. And so we also talked about some strategies that we could possibly use to address, to kind of work toward the futures that we want and to avoid the futures that we don't want. We had some great audience polling on those strategies. And really, I think the jewel of this program was a fabulous discussion with a group of community leaders that represented a lot of different points of view. So we had folks representing business sector, tourism sector, realty and housing, workforce. So it was a wonderful program where they really shared their feelings on the things that excited them about what they heard, things that they were concerned about with their different sectors. So it was a really great discussion. And so we had 157 attendees at the live event, and already we're not even 48 hours out. It's already been viewed 100 times on our YouTube channel. So it was a really popular event, and we continue those numbers to keep going up. Next slide. We're also producing some videos related to some important topics with our long range plan. So one is safety. This safety video we're going to be rolling out this month in September. We're working with the local government access channels to try and get this aired. So far have gotten a yes from Orange TV and Access Osceola, so that is a very good thing. And then we also are producing 2 videos on health. One is already done and available. That one talks about incorporating health into the planning process. And the next one will be a tutorial, kind of a step-by-step walkthrough of how to use a new online tool that we are going to be adding to our website this month called the Healthy Mobility Tool. Next slide. And so since we couldn't reach face-to-face the number of people that we really wanted to in the past few months, we did some market research. So we used a research company to conduct a public opinion survey. And the sample size for this survey was about 1,300 people in our 3-county area. And we used a new methodology for this one than we had in the past. If you've been with us for a little while, you have probably remember that in the past we've done phone-based surveys, mostly with UCF in partnership with them. And it's getting increasingly harder to reach people on the phone. As you probably know, you probably don't pick up numbers that you don't know when they call your phone. So this is becoming very expensive and harder to reach people. So we tried using an online panel for this particular public opinion survey. And the way we do that is that we work with a global company, and their job is to recruit people to take surveys. And these are, we used a company called Dynata. It's a very highly respected global company. They do this all around the world for major brands, airlines, companies like Hertz, Pew Research Center, all use this company. And so they helped us target people in our 3-county area. And we collected the data at the end of July. So this is very fresh information. And we focused our questions on a couple of areas. One, we asked about our 2045 plan goals. We wanted people to rate them in order of importance. And then we also asked them what top 3 changes they wanted to see to the transportation system. Next slide. So I'm going to share some highlights with you. And when we asked about the plan goals, this was really interesting to us because, you know, all these things are important and we know that. When we were doing kind of paper surveys and our face-to-face outreach, we always heard a lot of complaints. Oh, I can't choose between all these things. You know, it's really hard to put them in order. So when we did our research here, you can see that there's less than half a point difference between the number 1 and the number 5. So that means that people also had a hard time ranking them here. So essentially, all these things are important to people. So the order is a little bit different, but we can really see that our respondents looked at this and thought the same thing that we had been hearing. So all these things are important to them. Next slide. What we really find interesting is comparing this to what we were hearing pre-pandemic. So on the right side of this slide, you kind of see the order that we got in our post-pandemic survey. Before, these things were in a completely different order. So we saw a big jump. Investment and economy and health and environment jumped to the top of the list after the pandemic happened, which makes sense, right? Our whole economic situation is very difficult now, really high unemployment rates. So it makes sense that people would think that the economy was very important. And then health and environment. Health is very top of mind right now. And folks are also really kind of are rediscovering the environment, as this is one of the safe things that they can do is go outside, walk the trails, go to parks, things like that. So we found this to be a really interesting comparison. Next slide. And so when we asked about the top 3 desired changes to the transportation system, these were the top 3 across the board by far. So people want to see more smart traffic signals and sensors that automatically adjust for congestion, or in other words, using technology to make better use of the transportation system to make it more efficient. And then numbers 2 and 3 are really very closely related, and they're both related to public transportation. So people wanted to see more frequent public transportation that goes to more places. And then they also want to see better connections between transit and their final destination, or in other words, you know, you hear us say first mile, last mile connection a lot. That's what this means. So as we looked across our 3 county areas, these were the top 3 in each of the counties. You know, the order may have switched just very slightly depending on which county you look at, but there was agreement across the board on these as our most popular options. And when we looked at some of our demographics, the 2 transit options were the top 2 selections for our Hispanic and minority respondents. So these 2 things were equally important to those respondents, and that makes sense. Next slide. And so when we compared this to our pre-pandemic input, we found something really interesting. Next slide, please. So we got the exact same results, same top 3 with pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. So the current environment doesn't matter. People still want to see the same things out of their transportation system. They want more public transportation and more technology use in the system. Next. So we also have put out some communication tools, which hopefully you have received a hard copy of or electronic copy of. This is our annual report. It's called A Decade of Transformation, and it just talks about, going into this decade, what we can expect out of the transportation system, and it highlights a lot of our partners' accomplishments. Next. And so I will leave you with some uplifting feedback that we got from some of our youngest residents. These are letters that we got back. We just got them back actually from visiting a third grade class late last year. And so these are third graders' opinions. They'll all be in their mid-30s by the time our 2045 plan comes to life here. And so Natalia on the top left, I'm pretty sure she's going to be an electrical engineer in the future. She thinks that the most important thing about planning for the future is for there to be less pollution. And she wants to be able to get around using her flying electric car. Her one question that she had about the system was, where does electricity come from for trains? I thought that was super cute. And below that, you see Avery. Avery is our future entrepreneur. He wants to make sure that in the future we can reduce breakdowns. And by the way, those are one of the top things that cause congestion. So he's spot on. He wants to get around using his flying shoes. So he's very on trend with the micromobility there. And he also likes monorails. And he wants to know, how can he take Sunrail to get all the way around the world? So he wants to travel by train to get to lots of other places. On the right side, on the top, we have Ainsley. I think Ainsley is our future elected official. She thinks the most important thing about the future is to know what is happening. So she wants to be in the know on what's going on. She also likes trains, and she wants to know how much money will it cost. So she's very fiscally responsible already at an early age. And then lastly, we have Jason, which is our future traffic engineer. He thinks the most important thing about the future is making sure that we're being safe. And he also is a big fan of the flying car, and he wants more sky roads. But I thought his question was really a good thing to think about. He wonders if the government will stop pollution from cars. So our kids are, really concerned about safety, about the environment and preserving it. So I think we're in good hands with the future generation. Next slide, Kathy. And so really the next thing is just getting ready for adoption. You all will be taking a look at our cost feasible plans at your next few meetings, and then we'll be asking you to adopt at your last meeting of the year. So we will be getting ready for that in the next few months. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. You have a fantastic job, and that was a great presentation.
Thanks.
All right, do we have any questions about the public outreach plan?
From Mayor Dallas.
Any hands raised, or anyone want to?
Yeah, this is Mayor Dallas. I just wanted to ask about the survey. Where was this? I just want to know a little bit more about the process, about how many were polled, where were they polled?
Sure. Well, they
just
were.
A little bit of information on it.
Mm-hmm. So the online panel process, we actually work with the company that we get the sample from. So they're in charge of recruiting these folks, and we provide the survey link to them, and they distribute it. They make sure that the respondents who take it are vetted very thoroughly as real people and not robots, that kind of thing. And so that's the process. So we pay the survey company for the sample, and then they aid in distribution, but it's all done online. So we did it all through, they took a version of our survey on Qualtrics that our research company programmed.
So are they geographically properly sampled, et cetera?
They are. It's not a random sample as if you did a dialing, like a random dial, but the sample was representative of the demographics of our community. So we made sure that we compared it with the census demographics.
If you have that available, I wouldn't mind seeing it.
Sure. Yes, we are going to clean up the report, and we'll be posting a copy in the next few weeks to the website, so I can make sure that you get a link once that's posted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Does anyone else have any questions for Cynthia?
I don't see any other hands at this moment. Let me give it just a
Good job,
second.
Cynthia. That was really good. Good job.
Thanks so much.
No other hands, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Up next, we have a presentation on the 2045 Florida Transportation Plan by Ms. Judy Pizzo from FDOT staff.
Thank you. And I'm going to begin by apologizing. Hopefully you see my screen, my shared screen.
Yep.
But in the background, I fear you might be hearing my assistant. She is supervising the Massey gentleman who is here doing his job. So if you hear her in the background, I apologize for that. I want to thank MetroPlan Orlando again for allowing me to participate here with the Municipal Advisory Committee meeting. Some of you may have heard this presentation, you think. I know there's quite a few of you on the meeting here that have heard the presentation, and I hope you come up with some additional ideas. During this presentation, there is an online survey. We have 4 cross-cutting topics in this update, and 2 of those were presented last year, and the remaining 2 on state and interregional and regional and local are my focus today on obtaining information from you. So all of that said, moving along. So this explains why the update to the Florida Transportation Plan is important to us. It is our long-range transportation plan. This is done. It is a federal requirement. It is done about every 5 years or more. And I want to highlight a couple that were done most recently. The 2025 Florida Transportation Plan was updated in 2005. This included an emphasis on coordinating and supporting regional vision and collaboration needed to achieve those visions. The 2060 plan was adopted in 2010, and this brought about a much more economic-centered approach to transportation policy, including alignment with the Florida Strategic Plan for Economic Development and the Florida Mobility and Trade Plan. Our current plan has 3 elements: a vision element looking out 50 years, a policy element with a 25-year horizon to match up with the MPO's long-range transportation plan, and an implementation element. The update may also include a 4th element, being the performance element. The goals from the last update are remaining largely intact. Refinements made to them, such as linking transportation choices to improvements in accessibility and equity, reflect input from our partners and the public. The goal areas are representative of the themes that have historically been highlighted in our transportation plan and consider emerging trends and technologies that are impacting the transportation system today. Objectives identified for these goals often overlap goal areas. This update of the plan will consider objectives and strategies within those 4 cross-cutting topics that I mentioned earlier to better align the objectives and strategies and provide clear direction for implementation. Those topics, again, are technology, resilience, state and interregional transportation, and regional and local needs. As shown on this slide, you'll see those potential areas be covered under those topics. Again, you see under technology, we have an emphasis on ACEs and TISMO, big data. Resilience, I mentioned earlier, also consider extreme weather and emergency evacuation response. Your state and interregional, which I hope you'll focus on today, would be including modal facilities, trade, logistics, our economic drivers and industries. Regional and local, we're looking at urbanized, non-urbanized, congestion relief, land use and planning as an example. So these emerging trends for those cross-cutting topics have been identified for this update and documented in emerging trends handouts available on the Florida Transportation Plan website. I'll give you that link at the end of the presentation. Technology we're looking at has offered us, I'm sorry, my assistant in the background, many ways of traveling and changing the way we move freight, our behavior, and how we share and manage data. Also, with trends relating to resilience here in Central Florida, we're integrating more fully into our planning project development and other processes among the important questions that you might want to consider as we go through the survey. What natural hazards impact our transportation system? How can our system be resilient to evolving economic trends? And how can we better understand our transportation infrastructure and its vulnerability to hazards and threats? Trends relating to state and interregional encompasses multiple modes and focuses on linking regions together throughout our state and connecting Florida to markets around the nation and the world. Among potential areas, again, to cover under regional and local, you might consider regional values, you might consider the visions in those areas, our environment, our economic development. Here is your opportunity, and I do hope you'll participate in this survey. You can either using your smart device camera, scan the QR code and you'll see a little dialog box pop up where you can connect, or you can text to FTP 2045 to 22333, or if you want to online, key in www.pollev.com/FTP 2045. If anyone's having trouble scanning the QR code, let me know. We have our first slide. We'll be testing the system to see if you're able to get in successfully. Here you tell us who you represent. And it looks like I want to clear that if you would please and resubmit. There apparently was somebody else on the system. This is a statewide survey, and I apologize for that, as apparently somebody was using this poll just before me. I didn't catch that. So we are obviously working. So our next slide, we're going to talk about, I'm going to clear this real quick. We're going to talk about what trend is most important to, or you believe will have the biggest impact on our transportation future. Now, thinking again, regionally, locally, statewide, what do you believe? And so we have strong on funding and demographic shifts. So thank you. And if I'm moving too fast, let me know, but let me clear this again. And we will be keying in, what is your opinion? What is the greatest challenge for Florida to overcome related to changing technology and our transportation system? And again, this is from your perspective, regionally, statewide. What are your thoughts? Rapid rate of development, yes. And you can change your mind. You're not locked in. Okay, that's great. Now the next two slides I'll have to spend a little bit more time on. Again, let me clear this. In your own words, and again, there's no wrong answers here. This is what you believe, what your regional and local needs should be considered as we update the Florida Transportation Plan. So thinking from your perspective and your community, what are your needs that you believe we should be considering? I often get here in the local and regional is the first mile, last mile. I also get We're looking at funding. That is definitely number one on the list. So far, we have flexible transportation options, preserving historic characteristics. I'm reading these out from Mayor McDonald, who's on the phone. Cost crazy high, even for non-vehicle options. These are some great suggestions. Changing demographics. Central Florida is just evolving so quickly. Okay, I was about to change. Younger people will bike and walk further than may think they will. This is true. Well, even some of us older folks. All right, if you're still keying in, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move over to the next slide. Hearing no one speak up. This is our last slide. And again, let me clear it real quick. So this one is a little bit more thought-provoking. What are some strategies to increase statewide mobility for people and freight in the next 5 to 10 years? So strategies. Again, oftentimes I hear about funding. I hear about increasing the availability of rail and increasing the accessibility for electric vehicles to hook up in our state highway system. So what are some of your thoughts? High-speed rail, all 4 corners of the state. We may see that someday. That would be nice. Driverless trucks for safe stretches of the country. And needs of mobility will change due to ability for virtual work. Next generation not seeing the want or need to drive. Yes, I have several friends that their teenagers are not wanting to drive. So if there's anybody still keying in, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to go to my next slide. So what do we do with this information? Well, this is organized by our project team and presented to our steering committee who are guiding the plan update. As I stated, more information is available on our website. That would be www. And this is all one word, floridatransportationplan.com. We have multiple ways to continue to get involved and stay involved, even though this is getting towards the end of the campaign. As you see here in September, we're presenting our policy plan to management. You are actually my last presentation. I am proud to say that our district here has had the greatest number of participants of any of the other districts. Over 1,000 participants have given their input. November, we will be providing the policy for the public input, and then finally publishing in December. So I want to thank you again for your participation and for allowing me to present to the to your board. And if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pizzo. We all know District 5 is the best district of DOT. So does anyone have any questions for Ms. Pizzo?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any hands yet, but let me just give it a second. Well, looks like there are no questions.
Thank you. You're going to take the screen back.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you again.
All right, that concludes today's presentations. There are several items under the general information tab on in your agenda packet. And then there are some upcoming meetings of interest. Our next MAC meeting will be November 5th. And then again, MetroPlan staff will let us know how we're going to conduct that meeting, whether it be in person or through Zoom again. And then up next, are there any committee members who have any final comments from today's meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any hands for comments, but there is a comment in the chat that is requesting continued condolences and prayer for Mayor Cole and Mayor McDonald and their recent loss of family members, and of course anyone else who may have experienced loss. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, and then up next we have our second public comment portion of the meeting. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment? Please do so by raising your hand or dialing *9 on your phone keypad. We will unmute your mic, and then after you are recognized, if you would please state your name and address for the record, and comments are limited to 2 minutes.
At this moment, there are no hands, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and then are there any written or phone comments that were submitted before the meeting?
We did not receive any written comments or phone messages.
All right, hearing none. At this time, there is no further business for this month's meeting, and we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for stepping in. Appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody. Great job.
See you all in November.
Thank you.